stepped into Oval Office, his stances towards Ukraine have not been something much more static. While engaging in the peace deal, he seemed to have approached Russia. And I don't think so from Putin's side that Moscow is willing to step back at least 1 inch from their expectations. And even by any chance, if both nations would reach a settlement under the supervision of President Donald Trump, I would see whatever the outcome which may emerge after the negotiation will be a greater benefit for the Russian Federation. Even after fighting for 4 years, right? You need to understand that they have not been able to occupy whole Ukraine. Only Donbas and certain provinces are under the occupation of Russian forces. And if they come to a settlement after this, if they come to a permanent solution after this settlement, that would be a strategic victory for Moscow, but not for Kiev, because under the present circumstances, I don't find any possible avenue for Kiev to leverage their position.
How long, roughly, do you think we are away from a settlement between both parties?
I beg your pardon?
How far do you think we are from a settlement to be raised? So, as Donald Trump says that they're going good, how long do we actually expect it's going to be until a peace deal is signed?
I think, if I put a little bit of dark humor, Donald Trump's statements, which means going good, can be something very much humorous, not going too good. It can be going bad as well. Because when you look at what happened in Gaza, if you compare the situation in Gaza with Ukraine, it's a crystal clear fact that what Trump initiated in Gaza too has not been completely implemented. Gaza remains a mess, the body of the peace members there. So we should not be too optimistic about the deadlines or the mechanism to intensify the peace deal between Kiev and Moscow. But I can tell you one thing before I wind up the statement. If Kiev is not willing to compromise, if Kiev is not willing to enter into the peace deal, of course there would be consequences which can be definitely awful for Ukraine in terms of their sovereignty, because Donald Trump himself has clearly stated that they would not provide Tomahawk missiles, they would not provide any security guarantee to Ukraine. So the sovereignty practically depends on a major security protection comes from Washington, D.C., because they can't totally rely on the European allies.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pansara Amarasinghe, for joining us here on NewsX World. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is heading to Beijing on the first visit by a British leader in 8 years, saying that China matters as he seeks to repair ties with the world's second largest economy. Starmer is travelling with senior ministers and dozens of business leaders on a 3-day visit that will include meetings with Chinese President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang, followed by stops in Shanghai and Japan. The visit comes as Britain navigates growing tensions with the United States amid concerns over President Donald Trump's trade threats and foreign policy stance. Starmer has said closer economic ties with China are in Britain's national interest, even as he acknowledges security concerns. Trade and investment deals are expected to be signed during the trip. China has described the visit as a chance to open a new chapter in China-UK relations, while critics say London must balance economic engagement with strategic risks. We are now being joined by Dr. Ajay Dua, who is a senior economist, talking to us from Singapore. Thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World. What are the risks and rewards for the UK in trying to strengthen ties with China at a time where obviously a very close relation ally, US, when China and US are currently in a bit of a strain with each other?
Let me start with the rewards. The possible rewards are greater trade with China, UK's exports, or the exports from China to the UK last year, when China recorded a $1.2 trillion of trade surplus, were a bare 78, 77 billion US dollars. And that puts UK at about the 20th position in terms of the recipients of exports from China. In some ways, good, it's shielded, it saves its trade deficit, but at the same time, it shows that as of now, China is not high up in terms of commerce with the UK. I would like to see that situation improve considerably drastically, because the Chinese have always had interest in the UK and the city of London. The Chinese are a little put off with the US sorry, why am I saying US? With the UK for a couple of things. One, the meddling of UK in the democracy movement in Hong Kong in the year 2020 to 2022. And they would not like to see meddling around in what they call Hong Kong affairs. Hong Kong is no longer the British territory, it is China's, that it should keep up. Second, they would also not like to see China, the UK, talk about the human rights situation in China, something which UK has in the past taken it up with them, and that is why their relations were deteriorating, had deteriorated during the Conservative Party leadership. Now that the UK is in dire straits, its economy is not doing well, and its public expenditure of provision of public services is far from satisfactory. Labour Party has only 18 months ago come into power with Sir Keir Starmer as the head, but he is also facing rebellion from within the party, including by his challenger being the mayor of another city in the UK, not London, standing up for Parliament to stake his claim for the leadership. I would like to see such things settled, and if China is to help out, and it's a clear-cut case of helping out China, UK, it would need to ensure that it doesn't say more than it's required during the visit by Sir Starmer and his senior members, and concentrates on getting more economic aid, more trade, as well as encouraging investment from China into the UK. One good step towards that was before this visit, Sir Starmer and his cabinet have cleared the setting up of a huge embassy of China, 20,000 square feet in size, which is right next to where meaning they call it sensitive, that is where the Royal Mint used to be at one time. That should suit the Chinese to some extent.
And how can Britain balance economic opportunities with China against concerns over security and human rights without alienating either Beijing or Washington?
I don't think UK needs to worry too much about the United States. Yes, it has been its ally for the last 80 years. The two got along very well. The UK still hosts American bases there, and that was all a part of the NATO arrangement, where the NATO, led by the US, was providing a security cover to the whole of Europe, to all the 28 countries which are members of the NATO. Since that itself has been threatened by President Trump's own actions of wanting to grab Greenland somehow or the other, and the Europeans as a whole having stood up. UK may not be a part of the EU, but it hasn't kind of criticized the actions by the EU of standing up for their sovereignty. So to that extent, I think Sir Starmer can feel himself relieved of having to worry about how the US president thinks about its actions of working for its own economic growth and working for the welfare of its people, which it is not otherwise able to meet. For China, stepping up the trade is like a welcome step, because the world is worried that with $1.2 trillion trade surplus, the Chinese could be dumping goods into the other economies and upsetting their industrial structure by making those capacities redundant. I don't think there is such a fear in the UK, which otherwise itself has been feeling somewhat down and under with years of slow growth and at the same time also experiencing inflation.
Thank you so much, Dr. AJ Dua, for joining us here in NewsX World. US President Donald Trump has said that Cuba will be failing pretty soon, and Venezuela is the island's top supplier, which has not recently sent oil or money to Cuba. This comes after the US military seizure of former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in a deadly raid earlier this month that was ordered by Trump. Let's listen in to what Trump had to say.
Well, we're going to see what happens with Cuba. I don't know, anybody interested in Cuba in this room? Not too many people. This is not a Cuba room, but that's all right. There are plenty of them around, especially in Miami. And Cuba will be failing pretty soon. Cuba is really a nation that's very close to failing. You know, they got their money from Venezuela. They got the oil from Venezuela. They're not getting that anymore.
The European Union is set to guide Google on giving rivals fair access to its services and Gemini AI models. This move comes under the EU's Digital Markets Act, aimed at curbing big tech dominance. EU Tech Chief Henna Virkkunen said the guidance will ensure third-party search engines and AI providers get the same access as Google's own services. Google has rejected claims of unfair advantage, but welcomed discussions on compliments. 2 EU proceedings will now clarify the rules. One will focus on third-party AI providers getting equal access to Google's AI features. The other will define how online search rivals can use anonymized ranking, query, click, and view data fairly. Google says Android is open by design and already licenses search data, but these new rules formalize access for all competitors. That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
we would have dealt with U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The US is launching multi-day air drills in the Middle East, deploying a carrier-led armada as tensions rise with Iran, while Washington signals both military readiness and openness to talks. US President Donald Trump says the US and South Korea will work something out after he announced a hike in tariffs on imports for the Asian country to 25%. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will not allow a Palestinian state in Gaza, vowing to retain full security control over the territory. Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara will be visiting Moscow, Russia today to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This comes amid heightened regional tensions, as both are set to discuss those as priority. According to Syrian media reports, President Trump held a lengthy phone call with Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara, and they reiterated the importance of diplomacy amid heightened tensions with Iran. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says now is not the time for elections, as his government faces a crucial budget vote that could trigger a snap poll. Kenya's President Mamadi Doumbouya has reappointed former junta member Amadou Ori Ba as Prime Minister. Newly elected Doumbouya also announced a new government structure of 27 ministries and 2 secretaries general, with more appointments expected. TikTok owner ByteDance has reached a last-minute settlement in a landmark social media addiction trial, just ahead of jury selection, while Meta and Google remain defendants. Now for this hour, we start with Iran. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has told Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in a phone call on Tuesday that U.S. threats against Iran will only create instability in the region. Pezeshkian has said that the unity and cohesion of Islamic countries can guarantee lasting security, stability, and peace, and described American actions as aimed at disrupting regional security. Separately, a senior Iranian Revolutionary Guard commander has warned that neighboring countries would be considered hostile if their territory were used to launch attacks on Iran. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman responded that Riyadh will not permit attacks on Iran from Saudi's territory, reaffirming the kingdom's commitment to respecting Iran's sovereignty. The call comes amid heightened tensions following the arrival of a U.S. aircraft carrier strike group in the Middle East in what the United States says is a measure to ensure regional security. Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. He's a former Indian diplomat, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us. Good to see you. Now looking at this, what are we to make of this current situations as tensions rise? Although U.S. has said that, they are open to talks and diplomacy with Iran, it doesn't seem so. What's your take?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And I'm delighted to be on your channel once again.
Thank you.
My own take is that President Trump keeps all his options on the table with regard to Iran. He would prefer to bamboozle or browbeat Iranian leadership into making concessions on a nuclear deal, for example, missile force, and on proxies without having to actually undertake any military action. To that end, the option to take military action itself is being trumpeted, and that is a sort of last resort option. But then Mr. Trump is also known to go for a swift and very public military denouement, following which he could claim to have browbeaten the other side into making swift concessions and take the credit for the same. So as of now, we have a mounting uncertainty and a period of tension as Iran tries to maneuver itself to avoid military action, but without having to give too many things away from its strategic defense and missile and proxy related posture.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Ambassador. And what do you think if, U.S., if Saudi Arabia has said that they won't allow their airspace to be used or their territory to be used, so did UAE. So what choices does U.S. have right now?
Iran has very often threatened to take action against its neighbors who allow United States either military access or overflight clearances, etc., to attack Iranian targets. Saudi Arabia and UAE, for one, have eschewed that option, are declaring that they would not allow their airspace being used, their port facilities being used to attack Iran. This is partly in realization that they would be damaged collaterally if Iran attacks the US military assets in their territory, or even if Iran decides to harm these countries directly or through its proxies. So they don't want to be held accountable for American action, particularly as Mr. Trump has often acted without much consideration for other countries' interests. At the same time, they would also not like to be a party to Trump versus Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's SWAT. They do not particularly like the Iranian regime, but at the same time, they don't want to be threatened or damaged in this period of high tension. And that is why they have publicly stated that they would not allow this to happen over their territory or over their maritime boundaries. But if the United States still insists on using their airspace or maritime space, then they could easily claim that this was done without their permission. So one way or the other, they're trying to avoid being dragged into any forthcoming skirmishes between Iran and United States. You'd recall that in the last round, 12-day war between Israel and Iran, with the United States participating, Iranians actually bombarded the Udeid base in Doha, near Doha in Qatar, where America has its largest military presence in the region. So, in one way or the other, Qataris became involved in that fight. UAE and Saudi Arabia do not want that to happen to their interests. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we have a breaking news coming in. Breaking news from India. Indian state Maharashtra's Deputy Chief Minister Ajit Pawar has passed away in a plane crash today while attempting to land in Baramati. The aircraft coming from Mumbai was carrying 6 people in total. Authorities confirmed that 5 people, including Mr. Ajit Pawar, has passed away in the crash. The DGCA has confirmed his death. Emergency teams have rushed to the site and investigations are still underway. While Mr. Pawar, the longest-serving Deputy Chief Minister of Maharashtra, was in Baramati for his election campaign events scheduled throughout the day. Now we move on to Middle East. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is now focused on disarming Hamas and demilitarizing Gaza. The shift comes after the return of the last hostage from the Palestinian territory. Speaking at a televised press conference, Netanyahu has said Hamas must give up its weapons and dismantle tunnels across Gaza. The US-backed ceasefire, in effect since October 10th, requires Hamas's disarmament in its second phase. Furthermore, Netanyahu has reiterated that the conditions of Hamas disarmament must be met before any further steps are taken. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. He's a former Indian diplomat, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, how do you analyze the alignment of U.S.-Israel? As you know, it seems like U.S. is pushing for phase 2, whereas Israel seems to be pushing for the Hamas disarmament first as a priority.
It's a good question, and I think the two sides, Israel and United States, are acting in tandem. While Israel has delayed opening of Rafah border, which was under phase 1, claiming that the last remains of its last hostage had not yet been handed over. This was done a couple of days ago, leading to Rafah border being opened. But at the same time, Israelis have raised new objection, saying that Hamas has to be demilitarized and people have to, the Hamas people have to surrender their weapons before phase 2, which involves board of peace and stabilization force and aid, etc., being given to Palestinians in a tangible manner would be considered. So Israel is using its veto for the second phase to push for disarmament and de-weaponization of Hamas and associated groups that have fought Israel for nearly 2 years, ending in the ceasefire last year. This could not have happened without United States approval or cognizance, and I believe that the Board of Peace and international stabilization force and funds being arranged for reconstruction in Gaza are all tied to disarmament of Hamas and its associates and de-weaponization of the territory. So this way, both Israel and United States are acting as bad cop and good cop, and the whole idea is to put further pressure on Hamas and show it to be an obstructionist element in getting the stabilization and reconstruction of Gaza being undertaken. The idea is to put pressure on Hamas, but also to show to the affected Palestinian citizenry in Gaza and elsewhere, the Arab countries, that Hamas are the villains and Israel and United States are the good parties. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And do you think that, how do you analyze the reality of the fact that even though ceasefire was brokered in October last year, a lot of deaths have happened, in Israel and Gaza even since then. And do you think that there is a misjudgment from the government side or US and whoever has brokered peace between them, that the reality on the ground might be different? As you know, Netanyahu says that the tunnels need to be dismantled as well, etc. But on the ground, there's nobody except Hamas who is taking control of these Gaza's people.
You are right. Of course, the ceasefire has led to marked reduction in hostilities. Hamas, towards the end, had already gone into a defensive kind of posture vis-a-vis Israel, and Israel was ascendant, taking pot shots at Hamas and its cadres and the associated structure. All that has come down remarkably, but still Israeli actions have led to hundreds of Palestinians in Gaza being killed, as the local authorities' accounting is concerned. This was not unexpected. At the same time, I think Israel also wants to show that it didn't fight for 2 years only to allow Hamas to regroup and rearm themselves and launch attacks later on. So it wants to continue putting pressure, continue trying to create obstacles to Hamas's resurgence to the extent possible. And I think in doing so, it has the United States support. And it adds further pressure onto Hamas through military actions that they should agree to fade away and disarm and have some kind of amnesty being offered to them and relocation outside Gaza. At the same time, I think it is to be expected that these kind of skirmishes after the ceasefire would have sent a different kind of message to Hamas and associated groups that Israel's aggressive posture with regard to them and non-compromising stance with regard to Hamas makes it imperative for them to have sufficient deterrent military equipment beyond personal weapons to make sure that they can, if push comes to shove, inflict some long-term damage to Israel and its citizenry through rockets, through missiles, and other equipments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank former Ambassador Mahi Sachdev for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Now we move on to U.S. Minneapolis residents express outrage over the Trump administration's handling of the fatal shooting of Alex Preddy by federal agents. Many local citizens say they are sickened by the administration's response, accusing it of spreading lies and ignoring community safety. Former President Joe Biden has slammed the administration, calling the violence a betrayal of American values. However, Trump's aide Stephen Miller has suggested that ICE agents may have breached protocol, further fueling controversy. Meanwhile, residents and activists continue to demand justice for Preddy, while the White House defends its immigration policy. Regardless of the backlash, the Trump administration is standing by its actions, leaving the future of the federal enforcement in Minneapolis in question. Let's listen in.
Because some people may confuse when we say ICE out of Minnesota, it does not mean transported to another state or another community. We mean ICE out of all of our communities. ICE out of all of our communities.
For the job. So they need to send people here to handle immigration and customs enforcement. They know how to do the job without harming the community, without killing people, without hurting people, without imprisoning people that are law-abiding. That's what they're doing here. It's ridiculous.
I'm here today to push our state leadership even further to make sure that charges are brought against the ICE agents who killed our neighbors in Minneapolis. I think what's happening is unacceptable, and the only thing I feel like I can do right now is peacefully speak up and show up and keep showing up.
Now we welcome Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Dr. Nagao, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at the situation, how do you see it? Do you think this is escalating or de-escalating in Minnesota?
At least President Trump decided to de-escalate the situation, I think, and the Minnesota governor also agree with it. So, because video has released and the video shows ICE agent's protocol was breached, people believe, and President Trump also believe, I think. So that's why firstly the escalation has happened between Republicans versus Democrats, and after that checks what really happened. And simply in the long run, the President Trump will continue to cracking down the illegal immigrant, but just now it is not the proper time, he believe, and this is the decision, I think.
So how do you think, what exactly is the role of Minnesota's government and state government and versus federal government, as you know, the disagreements continue, but they need to make sure the public is safe while ensuring there is also freedom of speech?
Now, in this case, which government takes charge of the which organization is matter? In case of the state police, of course, the state police is state organization. That's why state governor has the right to show the influence. And in case of the federal government organization, ICE is organization. So that's why in case of the ICE, the federal government will take charge. So that's why in case of the cracking down the illegal immigrant, of course, ICE take charge. In this case, the federal government take charge. But in case of the law and order issue in the state, in this case, state governor takes charge. So that's why they need to talk to each other. But background reality is there is Republican versus Democrats, and the federal government is led by Republican, and the state government is led by the Democrats. That's why in this case there is a possibility that this situation will be escalated between the two political parties. But a video has released, and the view from this, both Republican and Democrats believe that this is a breach of the protocol. So that's why the political battle just now is meaningless. So that's why, based on facts, they try to de-escalate it. So that's why it has happened. But anyway, the organization who takes the responsibility is case-by-case basis. But the ICE case is federal government, and the state police is state government.
And also, as the conflicting accounts between federal officials and eyewitnesses footage regarding the shooting of Alex Pretty. So how does this clash of narratives affect the public trust in federal law enforcement and the administration's credibility right now?
Of course, this incident itself creates a bad image toward the ICE, it is clear. But at the same time, the Republican versus Democrat battle is escalating in many places in the state. But we need to remember the one important fact: cracking down of the illegal immigrants by ICE is troublesome in the state, only in the state when the Democrat governor is governing. So that's why in the Republican state there is no problem about the ICE-related issue. So that's why this issue is quite political. But now both President Trump and the state governor of Minnesota decide to de-escalate this. This incident should not be just a political battle between Republican versus Democrat. So that's why temporarily it is this escalating mood. So detente is coming, and but the detente is not meaning in the long run the battle will end. That's not true. The battle will restart it, but not just now. It's what happened now.
Do you think that this incident that's unfolding and the transparency, all of this is going to be affecting President Trump's midterm elections?
Of course, it could be the matter, but anyway, the trust between Republican versus Democrat is already bright. So that's why even if the Democrat side demand this, of course, the Republican side accepts some certain part, but at the same time, the Republican side also do not trust the Democrats, so that's why only partially they accept it, but totally it is very difficult to agree, because two parties battle is breaking their trust each other recently, so that's why the agree is possible, but not easy. It's a recent situation, I think.
Thank you very much, Dr. Satoru Nagao, for joining us today and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we move on and we stay in U.S. U.S. President Donald Trump has said that he had a great chat with the Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara. This comes after U.S. has been engaged in shuttle diplomacy to reach a lasting ceasefire and political resolution between the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, which was once its top ally in Syria, and Ahmad al-Shara, who is now United States' favorite partner in the country. Meanwhile, Trump has reacted. Let's listen into what he has shared.
I had a great conversation with the highly respected president of Syria, and all of the things having to do with Syria and that area working out very, very well. So we're very happy about it.
Now we move on to our tech news. Amazon has accidentally alerted employees about upcoming layoffs at its closed division. It's at its cloud division, On Tuesday, an internal email and team meeting invite went out hours before the planned Wednesday announcement, suggesting staff in the US and Canada and Costa Rica had already lost their jobs. The email, signed by AWS Senior Vice President Colleen Aubrey, referred to the layoffs as Project Dawn and said the decisions were made thoughtfully to position the company for future success. Employees reported that the Wednesday meeting was immediately cancelled, creating confusion and uncertainty. Amazon has not confirmed the details of the layoffs yet. According to reports, thousands of corporate employees could be impacted this week. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security.
Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The US is launching multi-day air drills in the Middle East, deploying a carrier-led armada as tensions rise with Iran, while Washington signals both military readiness and openness to talks. US President Donald Trump says the US and South Korea will work something out after he announced a hike in tariffs on imports from the Asian country to 25%. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will not allow a Palestinian state in Gaza, vowing to retain full security control over the territory. Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara will be visiting Moscow, Russia today to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This comes amid heightened regional tensions as both are set to discuss those as priority. According to SDF fighters and media reports, Russia has begun withdrawing troops and equipment from positions in northeastern Syria, including a base near Kamishli airport. However, no official confirmation has been issued by the governments for now. The move comes as government forces expand control over former SDF areas. According to media reports, President Trump held a lengthy phone call with Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara, and they reiterated the importance of diplomacy amid heightened tensions with Iran. Taiwan's defense ministry has warned that an opposition proposal to cut the planned $40 billion special military budget and drop the T-Dome air defense system, as they say it would not be practical for now and would undermine defense readiness amid growing pressure, as the special funding bill has now been blocked for the 10th time in Parliament. TikTok owner ByteDance has reached a last-minute settlement in a landmark social media addiction trial, just ahead of jury selection, while Meta and Google remain defendants. Now for this hour, we start with U.S. protesters in Minneapolis have celebrated the removal of Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino, who had become the public face of President Trump's aggressive deportation drive. The protest, titled "Goodbye Bovino," was triggered by the fatal shooting of 37-year-old Alex Petty by federal officers. The incident sparked national outrage, fueling calls for accountability and a reassessment of immigration enforcement tactics. Protests against ICE and Border Patrol's actions in Minneapolis have intensified in the wake of the killing. Meanwhile, protesters chanted "Abolish ICE, ICE out now." demanding a shift in U.S. immigration enforcement as well. However, Bovino, who will return to his former post in California, was replaced by Tom Homan, signaling a change in Trump's approach to the escalating tensions in Minneapolis. This shift comes amid growing criticism of ICE's actions and a push for justice for Preddy. Let's listen in.
They're the enemy! They're the ones terrorizing us. It's not our immigrant neighbors and trans brothers and sisters. We woke up to the truth. They're not going to gaslight us anymore because we see the truth, baby, with wide open eyes. And we're going to organize accordingly. And we're going to win our country back and win our planet back. Justice for Renee Good! Justice for Renee Good! ICE out now! ICE out now! ICE out now! ICE out now!
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Glenn Grant. He's an ex-advisor to Defense Minister of Ukraine and geopolitical commentator, joins us live from Riga. Thank you very much, Mr. Grant, for joining us again. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Now, looking at what's happening in U.S., especially who was Mr. Bovino, and now he's being replaced by Tom Homan. Is he different from Bovino? What can we expect?
That is a very good question.
Thank you.
But I think that there will be an attempt to scale this back. You have to remember that the choice of Minnesota was political. It wasn't because there were more that there were more immigrants in Minnesota. In fact, there weren't at all. But Governor Waltz in Minnesota was, of course, is of course a Democrat, and was a potential vice president. So this was. Minnesota was attacked, so to speak. But Minnesota is also a very sort of independent place, and people were really unhappy with how ICE were behaving, and it's not surprising. I mean, considering that they've now killed several people, and quite a few have disappeared, and nobody knows where they are. Now, will Homan, the border czar, be any different? I think he's got to be, because if they carry on in the way that they were going, then we're only a few steps away from effectively a civil war in Minnesota.
Yes. So, like you rightfully mentioned and highlighted that the way they were carrying this out, what is state government's responsibility and also what is the federal government's responsibility, especially in this case in Minnesota, where they disagree with each other, and also while protecting the civil rights of free speech and protecting, the lives of public, the lives of civilians, but of course the two people who were fatally shot. Yeah,
it's interesting because of course the powers that ICE has are effectively powers around the border. I mean, they are part of the anti-immigration force. So they don't have normal government powers. I mean, they haven't got powers of arrest. They haven't got powers of stop and search and things like this. The police and so like the sheriff's office have got. So the way that they've come in with huge numbers has actually been not only aggressive, it's actually been illegal in most cases, and the way that they behave. Now, the state's job is just normal law and order protection, not immigration. Remember that immigration is an administrative offence. No matter how people call it and shout about it being a crime, it's actually only an administrative offence, and therefore state is not bothered with it. State is only concerned that those people, when they're in the country, behave, and which in Minnesota area they have been, because people don't misbehave usually in very cold areas, because as you know, standing outside or misbehaving when it's -20 is not a joke for anybody. So Minnesota is usually and normally a very law-abiding area. There was all this talk about talk about Somalis actually doing things wrong and stealing money, most of which was actually proven to be totally untrue. So the state is not interested. State wants peace and quiet, and that's their job. In fact, state could arrest the ICE people, but they won't, because to start doing that means effectively, again, it's government versus government, which would not be very pretty.
And also, the looking at the last person who was shot, Pretty. So there's conflicting accounts, right? His family says something else, social media says something else, and government says something else. What are we to make of this? The transparency, the lack in transparency, the lack in one kind of narrative, and also public trust amid upcoming elections.
Well, let's be clear. The man was killed for no purpose. I mean, no police, no state police would shoot someone for doing something like that. He was pushed over. They grab him by the scruff of the neck, pick him up, and march him off. I mean, this is not a killing offence. Let's be quite clear about that. And the problem is that the ICE, the ICE, whatever you want to call them, military, have been poorly selected and in many cases untrained. So you've got people that should not be carrying a weapon, walking around wearing police, which, by the way, they are not police. They're government administrative officials. So the narrative is quite clear. The man was killed unlawfully, no question about it. But the government has doubled down, trying to say that everybody that counters, that goes against ICE, is some sort of terrorist, is being put there politically, is being paid, and it's the government narrative that is completely untrue and unreal.
Yes.
Trump's narrative, if you want to call it that. So they're causing problems for the government and for the coming elections by doing that. Hence the change and Homan coming in.
But do you think, the change and Homan coming in, do you think that's enough for Trump to gain back the trust from the voters, or gain some votes as he has lost a lot of popularity?
Not a chance. Not a chance. In this state, it's gone beyond the pale. There is no way that he can get back what he's done. Killing one, they might have managed it. Killing two, there is no chance. And I don't know if you noticed, but there also have been quite a few marches down in Texas against what is going on. So this is not just isolated to Minnesota. This is spreading all over America. And I think if ICE continues, you're going to see Trump go down badly at the midterm elections.
Thank you for sharing that insight, Mr. Grant. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to and staying in US, at the Sundance Film Festival, actress Natalie Portman has delivered a powerful condemnation of US President Donald Trump and ICE, calling their actions outrageous following the fatal shooting by federal agents in Minneapolis. Portman has expressed her outrage over the treatment of both citizens and undocumented individuals, referring to the situation as obscene. However, she has also praised the community's solidarity, stressing the importance of support during these trying times and calling for change. The actress made these remarks while promoting her film, The Gallerist, at the film festival, marking her debut appearance at Sundance. Let's listen into what Natalie Portman has shared.
It's really been, it's such a horrible day. It's been a horrible week. And it's very joyful to be at a film festival and in a creative community celebrating film together. But what is happening in our country is just obscene, and what Trump and Kristi Noem and ICE are doing to our citizens is, and to undocumented people, is outrageous and needs to end. I'm very moved by all of the people coming out and supporting each other in community and showing the best of America, really being like incredible neighbors and citizens. But it's just too much. It needs to end. It's incredible to get to produce with Sophie, my producing partner in Paris, and make this very beautiful comedic light film that is really about art and commerce. A lot of the questions I think we have at Sundance itself, and it's really exciting to get to premiere it here. And this is my first time at the festival, wild as that is, yeah.
Now we move on to our next news. U.S. President Donald Trump has held a phone call with Syria's President Ahmad al-Shara. They discussed Syria's transitional phase, regional security, and ways to strengthen bilateral cooperation. Al-Shara reaffirmed Syria's commitment to territorial unity, national sovereignty, and civil peace, warning against the return of terrorist groups, especially Daesh. Trump has welcomed the ceasefire and praised the integration of military forces, including the Syrian Democratic Forces, into official institutions. Both leaders stressed dialogue as the path to resolving regional disputes, and Trump offered U.S. support for Syria's reconstruction and economic stability. Now, for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Glenn Grant. He's joining us live from Riga. Thank you very much, Mr. Grant, for staying with us. Thank you. Now that U.S. President it's.
That's a good question, and I wonder how long it will keep going for. Because I mean, as you know, America was actually supporting the Kurds, and now has basically pulled out of that, and is supporting the Syrian president. I don't know what the deal is that Trump is after, but it is interesting that the Russians appear to be pulling out of Syria at the moment, and it's why they're pulling out, what America is actually offering Syria, and what America is after getting away, from Syria, is unclear. But the dynamics of that region are just unbelievable, because you still got the dynamic of Iran having been involved deeply in the country for a long time. So is this counter Iran? Is this counter Russia? I'm not sure. And only time is going to tell us exactly what it is that Trump is after.
And now that we see some media reports coming about Russian forces removing their forces slowly, and also Ahmad al-Shara going to Russia today, and then the talk of U.S. President and Ahmad al-Shara just happened within 24 hours. How can you connect all this?
To be honest, it's really hard to connect all this. There is no clarity at the moment of how and why these things are happening. I mean, clearly, I'm guessing, and this is only a guess, that the Syrian president does not have total faith in America, and is hedging his bets by going to Russia and by staying involved with the Russians to a degree. Maybe he thinks he's going to get cheaper military equipment. Maybe he's after oil. Maybe he's after something else. But it's strange that on one side, you've got Trump showing willingness, I suppose, to engage with Syria on a positive fashion, and to change sides from helping the Kurds to helping Syria. It's strange that should happen, and then the Syrian president still wishes to retain the Russian link, even though the Russians are pulling out. This is one we're going to have to wait. We're going to have to give it a bit of time, maybe a month or two, before actually all these things become clear.
Yes.
We wait and see.
Right. One thing I'm also waiting and seeing is how Ahmad al-Shara's image is changing, and how his how his alliance or his closeness with, a lot of world leaders is playing into his new image. How do you think that is changing?
Well, of course, I mean, he was it's not that long ago. I mean, he's been president now for just I'm not sure it's even a year. It was, I think, January 25. And of course, before that, he was a terrorist. One of those bearded men running around with rifles, attacking every country that they could to get Syria back. Now he's trying to turn himself into this man of the world. Let's just call it that. Don't forget that he was medically educated, so he's not an unintelligent person, and so he has a degree of sophistication already in his background. So it's quite possible that he can come out of this as a leader with standing, and a leader with a leader that people are happy to talk to, like Trump. But he does have to be careful. He cannot play all sides against each other, and that's a risk that he has to be very, very wary about, because not everybody's going to feed him if he's seen to be playing with the enemy.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Glenn Grant for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Now we move on to South America. The Colombian Foreign Minister Rosa Yolinda Villavicencio has said that for Colombia, the motivation behind the questioning of Colombia's loyalty to the agreement and to bilateral operation remain inexplicable. The Colombian Trade Minister Diana Morales has announced that the imposition of new 30% tariffs on Ecuadorian products in response to the duties applied by Ecuador. Meanwhile, the Colombian Foreign Minister, Defense Minister, and Trade Minister have reacted. Let's listen into what they have shared.
También es sorprendente porque todo el tema del narcotráfico en Ecuador se mueve más en la zona de la costa y no en nuestra frontera, porque tenemos un pie de fuerza controlando de más de 10.000 hombres de fuerza de seguridad, incautando y persiguiendo al crimen organizado. Por eso resulta mucho más sorprendente esa excusa.
Si hay una nación que ha combatido con total vehemencia y que le ha costado muchísimo la lucha contra el narcotráfico, es Colombia. Es absurdo mencionar que hace falta voluntad de parte de Colombia en la lucha contra el narcotráfico cuando las cifras demuestran todo lo contrario.
De AAA, y es la imposición también de manera recíproca del 30% a 23 productos ecuatorianos y sus subproductos. Esta medida ya está publicada para comentarios y una vez.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Ms. Mitali Nikore. She's an economist, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ms. Nikore, for joining us. Good to see you. Now,
thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now looking at this, how could Colombia's decision to impose 30% tariffs affect their bilateral flows? As you know, we know that Colombia is, of course, not politically stable yet. And what economic risks does Colombia face if Ecuador responds with further trade measures?
No, absolutely. I mean, this is actually quite a surprising development because for many years we've seen that, Colombia has not gone ahead and imposed tariffs on pretty much, that many countries. Colombia has maintained, a rules-based trading order. And I think this entire move of imposing tariffs on Ecuador links with the larger set of, global reactions that are taking place through the Trump tariffs. Once, a country like the US goes and imposes tariffs on the whole world, it sort of pressurizes, especially right-wing governments across the world to go ahead and use tariffs as a credible threat in the geopolitics for their countries, and I think this is exactly what we're seeing playing out in the Colombia-Ecuador crisis.
And what impact might these new tariffs have on prices for Colombian businesses, consumers in long term and short term?
So in the short term, I don't actually expect this to have a very big impact immediately going ahead, because it may be that some of the exporters actually adjust their prices, because the 30% tariff is not that high. 30% out of that, maybe, at least half of it can be absorbed by exporters and importers. So we may not see an immediate impact in the shorter term. It may also be that, the two sides actually decide to have a discussion and dialogue and come up with, a compromise on the tariff situation. But if Ecuador goes ahead and imposes retaliatory tariffs on Colombia, that's when this escalates and risks, getting into a trade financing crisis, and that is a situation that the global order should avoid, because again, it sets a precedent for other countries to also use tariffs and to also use retaliatory tariffs.
And now, how could this escalating trade tensions influence also investor sentiment, cross-border business activity, as we know that they are all very intertwined?
No, absolutely. I mean, see, at the end of the day, there are a lot of businesses which look at Colombia, Ecuador, and a group of countries in Latin America almost as a region and not as just separate countries. Because when we look at, institutional investors who are based in the US, who are amongst the largest investors in the region, they definitely look at, these countries like as a block as opposed to just individual countries. So, when two of these countries are not able to work together, it actually spooks investors, and investors may start to question whether this is a short-term knee-jerk reaction of an unstable government and will be sort of removed in the near term if the government changes, or if this is a signal of worsening relations between the two countries. And in this situation, the advice for the two countries would always be to work out their differences regardless of which disposition of the government is in power, because otherwise it creates an unstable region and spooks investors.
Yes. Well, building on that, Ms. Nikore, so is there any country that can play that part of diplomacy or mediation between these two countries?
So this is actually quite an interesting and loaded question in times like this, because the US is always standing as a global mediator and is always one of the first to take credit in situations like this. So, but in this situation, I do think the US can play a meaningful role. Because there are a lot of investors from the US who are involved in these two countries, so there is that option. Of course, there are the options of a number of Nordic countries who also have very deep trade ties with Colombia as well as with Ecuador. So there is always that option, but the ideal option always is for the two countries to come together and work out their differences without a third party.
Thank you for highlighting that and sharing that insight with us, Ms. Nikore. Thank you very much. Now we move on to India. Indian state Maharashtra's Deputy Chief Minister Ajit Pawar, who has been killed today along with 4 others after a small aircraft crashed near Baramati in Pune district. The chartered Learjet 45 took off from Mumbai at around 8:10 a.m. IST and disappeared from flight radar shortly before 8:45 a.m. Officials say the aircraft ran into trouble while attempting to land, veered off the runway and caught fire after impact. The crash occurred around 8:50 a.m. All 5 people on board were rushed to hospital but were declared dead. The Directorate General of Civil Aviation has confirmed the fatalities. Mr. Ajit Pawar was traveling to Baramati to attend public meetings ahead of the February 5th Zilla Parishad elections. Condolences have poured in from across the political spectrum. President Draupadi Murmu, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Union Home Minister Amit Shah, and Defense Minister Rajnath Singh have all expressed grief over his death. Now we move on to UK. Parts of the UK are under severe weather warnings as Storm Chandra brings heavy rain, strong winds and flooding. Travel across England, Scotland and Wales is disrupted with road closures, rail, ferry and flight cancellations as well. Flood warnings cover nearly 100 areas with a major incident declared in some rest Somerset after 50 properties were flooded. Schools are closed in several regions, tens of thousands are without power, and snow and ice risks are rising on soaked roads. Storm Chandra is the third major UK storm this month following Ingrid and Gretty, causing widespread damage as well as disruption. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The U.S. is launching multi-day air drills in the Middle East, deploying a carrier-led armada as tensions rise with Iran, while Washington signals both military readiness and openness to talks. U.S. President Donald Trump says the U.S. and South Korea will work something out after he announced a hike in tariffs on imports from the Asian country to 25%. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will not allow a Palestinian state in Gaza, vowing to retain full security control over the territory. Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara will be visiting Moscow, Russia today to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This comes amid heightened tensions as both are set to discuss those as priority. According to Syrian media reports, President Trump held a lengthy phone call with Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara, and they reiterated the importance of diplomacy amid heightened tensions with Iran. Taiwan's defense ministry has warned that an opposition proposal to cut the planned $40 billion special military budget and drop the T-Dome air defense system, as they say it would not be practical for now and would undermine defense readiness amid growing pressure, as the special funding bill has now been blocked for the 10th time in Parliament. Guinea's President Mamadi Doumbouya has reappointed former junta member Amadou Ouri Ba as Prime Minister. Newly elected Doumbouya also announced a new government structure of 27 ministries and 2 Secretaries General, with more appointments to be expected. TikTok owner ByteDance has reached a last-minute settlement in a landmark social media addiction trial, just ahead of jury selection, while Meta and Google remain defendants. Now for this hour, we start with U.S. Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar was sprayed with an unknown substance during a town hall in Minneapolis. A man attacked Omar with a syringe, releasing a foul-smelling liquid before being swiftly tackled by the security. However, Omar continued her remarks, showing her resilience in the face of this attack. The incident occurred amid her strong criticism of U.S. immigration and customs enforcement, where she called for its abolition. The suspect was arrested and charged with third-degree assault. However, this attack has drawn widespread condemnation from political leaders across party lines, with local officials and lawmakers denouncing the assault. Further investigation into the incident is underway, with authorities ensuring that this type of violence against public figures will not be tolerated. Now we move on to Russia and Ukraine. Russian strikes near Ukraine's capital have killed 2 people and wounded several others, according to regional military officials. The latest attack brings the death toll from overnight strikes across Ukraine to at least 12 people. 5 of those killed were passengers on a civilian train, which was hit by a Russian drone in the northeast. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has condemned the attacks as terrorism, saying they are undermining peace efforts and ongoing U.S.-brokered talks. The strikes have also knocked out power to hundreds of thousands, leaving civilians without electricity in freezing winter conditions. Despite diplomatic talks held last week and more planned, strikes has continued heavy drone and missile attacks across the country as well. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Colonel Sanjit Sirohi. He's an international relations and defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Colonel, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how do you think, how is this, ongoing escalating attacks jeopardizing the ceasefire efforts that's been done from all parties?
Good morning, Usuma.
Good morning.
First of all,
Yes.
thank you very much for having me on this channel for discussing something very, very important. Now, as you see, in last 24 hours, there have been 12 people have been killed, and especially what is alarming is the attack on a train in the northeast, in the Kharkiv region, where 5 people have died and a number of them have been injured. So Zelensky is absolutely right when he calls this a terrorism or act of terror. And it is undermining the efforts to end the war. On the one hand, there are peace talks going on. That we just had 2 days of peace talks on Friday and Saturday in Abu Dhabi, and the next round of talks are being planned for 1st February, for which Mr. Zelensky has said that it should be preponed, so that the Russians, they are brought to the negotiating table and the war comes to an end as early as possible. But what I see is that as the talks are getting closer, the Russians are striking again and again because they have not been able to achieve their objective, which was to take over the complete Donbas region. And that is the main point of contention between the two parties. So I think this escalation will keep on going on till the peace deal is finalized. Asuma.
So why do you think that Russia is intensifying, attacks now? Some of our guests have suggested that before the ceasefire happens, they want to take as much territory as possible. That's their intention. What's your take on that, Colonel?
Absolutely, Asuma. I fully agree with the guests who have said that. The main aim is that if you see the objective of Russia's offensive or military operation, as they call it, was to take the Donbas region complete. Now, so far, they have been able to take only 90% of that, and still the 10% is left. And their main agenda is that they are going to capture the complete Donbas region unless Zelensky agrees to hand over the complete Donbas region to Russians. The Russians will keep on escalating so that they ensure that Zelensky accepts their demand as early as possible. So this escalation is not going to end on 1st February. If the talks are further delayed, then this escalation will keep on moving till Russia has achieved their military objective, that is of taking the complete Donbas region. So Zelensky has to be prepared for that. Now the choice between Zelensky has is either to hand over the complete Donbas region or keep on fighting and keep on losing and keep on having a lot of casualties every day. Asuma.
And Colonel, so as we know that trilateral talks used to take place elsewhere, like Turkey, Alaska, and now they've moved to UAE, a Middle Eastern country. Do you think the locations matter and the mediation efforts by UAE makes any difference from the mediation efforts that was being done by US in comparison?
Look, if you look at that, now this was the first time when they met on 23rd January and 24th January, when all the three parties, that is United States, Ukraine, and Russian delegation, they met, and that included the military officials also. So I think it was quite a serious issue, and why Abu Dhabi has been selected for these talks. I think it is the neutral country where all the three countries have good relation with Abu Dhabi. So I think that must be the reason that they have selected this place as a neutral place. Asuma.
Right. And also, do you think that the U.S., before it was always a bilateral, right? U.S. was in the middle always, but now that it's become trilateral, all these three parties are in the table. Do you think it was because U.S. pushed their agenda too hard to both parties when they were using U.S. as a channel or mediator? Or do you think there were other reasons that now it's a trilateral?
Look, the problem what is there is that initially the talks were between the Americans and the Russians. So the Ukrainians were not involved, and it was quite funny also that the party who is fighting the war was not included. Because initially when the proposal were given, it was pro-Russian proposal which Ukrainian had not agreed to it. And secondly, since USA has to give the security guarantee after the peace deal has been brokered, so that is the reason why USA is also involved. Unless Zelensky is completely sure and confident that Americans will give him security guarantee after the peace deal has been brokered, till then I think USA is going to play a very important role. And secondly, USA is trying to pressurize Mr. Zelensky to agree to the demands of Russia, and that the main demand, which is the bone of contention, is about the territory. So which Zelensky is not ready to, in fact, he says that the territory issue should be respected by all the parties. So that is the main bone of contention. Only one point has been left out, and that is the territory. Until Mr. Zelensky agrees to hand over that Donbas region to Russians, I don't think any peace deal will be brokered. Asuma.
Thank you very much, Colonel, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for later discussion. Now we move on to Middle East. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned that Israel would strike back with unprecedented force if Iran attacks the country. Netanyahu has said that any attack by Iran would be met with a level of force it has never experienced. He has also referenced U.S. President Donald Trump's recent remarks on Iran, while stressing Israel will act independently if threatened. The warning comes amid heightened tensions after the United States deployed an aircraft carrier strike group to the region. Iran has responded that it would defend itself against any aggression. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian also criticized U.S. threats in a call with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, calling them destabilizing to the region. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Colonel Sanjay Sirohi. He's joining us from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Colonel, for staying with us. Now, how are we to make of this situation where, U.S. says that they're open to talks, and Netanyahu is giving these kind of warnings that we heard just now, and Iran has also started to, send messages like no attack will be tolerated, and also now countries like UAE and other countries have stated that they don't want their airspace to be reached or used. What's your take?
Look, if we see for last 1 week or 10 days, there has been escalation in the rhetoric of all the three parties, that is United States, Iran and Israel. And these are, day by day, these rhetoric are escalating. As a result of which, there is a lot of tension in the Middle East. The United States carrier has already moved. Abraham Lincoln has already reached the area where it is supposed to be deployed. So I think the tensions are very, very high, and the complete Middle East countries, they are very, very worried about that in case their space is used by the American forces whose bases are located in these countries, then there will be retaliatory attack from the Iranians. And Iranians have made it absolutely clear that our neighbors, we take them as a friend, but if their airspaces are being used by the Americans, then we will consider them as hostiles, and we will take all actions which are required to be taken in that situation. So this situation is very, very bleak and very, very problematic for everyone. And Mr. Netanyahu has made it absolutely clear that whatever decision Israel will take, that will be taken by them and not by Donald Trump. Let Donald Trump take whatever decision he wants to take, but the Israelis will decide what action they have to take. So, because what is happening is that Mr. Donald Trump is not very sure whether he is going to attack or not attack, because I think he is worried about attacking, because he knows that once he attacks Iran, this time it will be full-fledged war, which the Americans' economy and the American administration does not want. So the other option, I think, which Mr. Donald Trump may be trying to evolve is that, like Venezuela, where there was a naval blockade for the last 2-3 months, the same naval blockade the Americans will try on Iran also. And as and when the situation they feel is absolutely right to take any decision, that is the time they will take the decision either to strike Iran or to change the regime by kidnapping, like it was done in the Venezuela case, Ayatollah Khamenei. If that be the case, then there will be all-out war. Asuma.
And how do you analyze the current readiness or the combat readiness of US in the Middle East and also Iran? Do you think Iran is capable? How do you analyze their capability? Yes.
Look, Asuma, if you see the military balance between the two countries, Americans are much, much stronger than the Iranians. But Iranians are not the Venezuelan army. They are hardcore, they have got professional army, they are dedicated and they love their country. So it will not be easy for the Americans also to do what they have done in Venezuela. Although the Iranians in the last are going to lose, but they will fight, and they will fight very well, whether it is Americans or they are fighting with Israel, they are going to fight it very hard, and it will be a problem for both Iran and Americans. And if Israel also comes into play, then for the Israelis also. The Iranians, I think militarily they may be not that strong as the Americans, but they have got enough forces. In addition to that, they have got proxies. The Houthis in Yemen have already said, and they have circulated a video in which they have shown a burning ship, and there is written on that we are coming soon. So in addition to the Iranian forces, there are the proxies which may be like, to some extent they have been disarmed, like Hezbollah and Hamas, but there are Iranian proxies in Iraq also who are ready to fight for Iran. So it will not be an easy win for Donald Trump. He has to fight it out, and the final victory will not be that clean.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And last but not least, Iran has reached out to Saudi Arabia and other Muslim countries which are not traditionally they're not traditional allies, I must say. Also the fact that Iran is a Shia Muslim country and Saudi Arabia is hardcore Sunni Muslim country, right? Yes. So do you think Iran is cornered that way, or do you think Iran is desperate? That's why we see this happening.
No, I don't agree to that. Iran is cornered. They are not cornered. They are absolutely placed in the right place, and they are playing the right diplomatic game also. They've already mentioned to their neighbors or the other countries that they are friendly with them. They have got no enmity with them. They are their friends, as long as they don't allow the Americans to use their airspace, whether it is land, air or sea. So that they have made it very clear, and they also know that if they are going to fight with Americans, so they cannot launch missiles which can land in America. So they will start firing at the bases of Americans which are in these states only, like Jordan there, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi there, Djibouti is there. So there are number 9-10 bases which are active, and there are another 20 bases which are not active. They may be activated later on, or they may be in the process of activating them. So it is not that the Iranians are cornered. They are going to fight, and they are going to fight very well. They are not going to not only inflict casualties on the Americans fleet, but they are going to inflict casualties on the American bases also. And those bases are located in these countries. And if I am saying that if Americans they start hitting their oil sites, then the Iranians will start hitting the oil sites of all the other neighboring countries also. That is why all the neighboring countries are worried, and they have categorically, especially Saudi Arabia, have told Americans that they will not allow their airspace to be used by American forces. Asuma.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Colonel Sirohi for joining us today and sharing that insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we move on to US. The US dollar has been grappling with a crisis of confidence as it has struggled nearly 4-year lows after President Donald Trump has brushed off its recent weakness, exacerbating the dollar selling and lifting the yen, euro, and sterling. Trump has said that the value of dollar was great. Meanwhile, the dollar was tumbled over 9% in 2025 and has started the year on the back foot already, down about 2.3% in January 2026. Let's listen into what Trump has shared.
No, I think it's great. I mean, the value of the dollar, look at the business we're doing. No, dollar's doing great. You know, it's very interesting. If you look at China and Japan, I used to fight like hell with them because they always wanted to devalue their yen. You know that? The yen and the yuan. And they'd always want to devalue it. They devalue. And I said, not fair that you devalue because it's hard to compete when they devalue. But they always fought, no, our dollar's very good.
Now we move on to our tech news. According to reports, China has approved the import of NVIDIA's H200 artificial intelligence chips. The approval covers several 100,000 H200 chips. The move comes during NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang's visit to China this week. Reports have confirmed that the first batch has been allocated mainly to 3 major Chinese internet companies. Other enterprises are now in line for subsequent approvals. The H200 is NVIDIA's second most powerful AI chip and has been a key point of tension in US-China relations. Despite strong demand from Chinese firms and US export approval, Beijing had previously delayed allowing imports. Now, for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Somraj Bhattacharjee. He's an AI and market strategic expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Mr. Somraj, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how could China's approval of importing these chips affect, NVIDIA's revenue outlook, also stock performance? What does this initial allocation chip of AI H200 chips mean?
Yeah, thank you for having me. What happens is that when you import such large amounts of advanced chips like H200, you are basically working against the US export controls, because primarily NVIDIA is an American company, it's based in the US. With the Chinese government deciding to get so many chips from the US, it directly impacts the export control norms that are right now. That's condition number 1. Condition number 2, this gives a lot of leverage to the US when it comes to future conflicts and issues, for example, geopolitical issues, where US can cut off supplies to China, thereby delaying shipments, delaying production, basically impacting their industrial production. Thirdly, security concerns. What happens is when you are using chips that are non-Chinese, the Chinese government agencies will be giving access to their data to other foreign bodies. These are the 3 primary geopolitical constraints and challenges that are going to come up. As far as technical issues are concerned, we all know that the H200 chips from NVIDIA are some of the most advanced AI accelerators out there. So there will definitely not be any technical challenges. There may be issues with infrastructure integration in the Chinese ecosystem because these chips are very advanced and the Chinese have not used such high quality chips before. So let's see what happens over there. But yeah, that's what I foresee happening in the immediate future.
Right. And how does this, what impact might this availability of H200 chips have on competition within China's domestic AI and cloud computing markets?
Yeah. So this is going to impact the demand for high performance chips within China very fast, because the Chinese ecosystem does not have such robust and such advanced chips at present. The competitive positioning will impact China directly in the long term, because a lot of Chinese local companies will start, because we all know the Chinese are very good at adapting technology. So we are going to see that the Chinese global positioning is going to go up, for the local companies is going to go up significantly, because when they start using these chips, they will start copying these chips, and we can very well expect that in the coming years or months maybe, we will see a lot of competition for NVIDIA from local Chinese manufacturers. But again, this is purely speculative based on how we are anticipating the market will respond, depending on how the chips will perform. If the chips are unable to perform well, if computing power goes down due to such chips, this may have an adverse effect. But for now, at least, we can say that the competitive positioning of Chinese chip manufacturers in the global AI ecosystem is going to be very, very strong.
And how does this approval shift by US, and also China risk profile for US semiconductor companies operating amid US-China tensions?
Yes, so that was part of the first point that I had raised with you, that this reopening of the advanced AI hardware flow between US and China is going to again give a lot of leverage to the US and not China, because right now China has a lot of leverage over US when it comes to rare earth metals, right? Yes. Where China can decide when to turn the switch on or turn the switch off when it comes to supplying rare earth metals and materials to the US. US is trying to balance this by having a command over the computing architecture, the computing hardware within China. Thereby, if in the future China again decides to turn off the switch for rare earth metals, US may use their leverage of supply of such chips and more such chips in the future, thereby limiting the impact of the Chinese leverage in the market. So it's more of a counterbalance. This is all part of how the geopolitical steps are taken. And this may very well be a very smart move by the Americans, but I'm sure the Chinese are doing this keeping in mind their long-term interests. So as I said in my previous answer, you will see a lot of Chinese companies coming up in the market and copying the technology within these chips, thereby trying to reposition the local Chinese chip manufacturing industry against some of the largest in the US and Taiwan.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Somraj for joining us today and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to South Korea. A South Korean court has found former First Lady Kim Kyun-hee guilty of accepting the bribes. Kim, the wife of ousted ex-president Yoon Suk-yeol, faced allegations of receiving luxury gifts, including Chanel bags and a diamond necklace, from the Unification Church in exchange for political favors. She was cleared of the charges related to political funding violations and stock manipulation. Prosecutors had sought 15 years in prison and fines of around $2 million. Kim denied all wrongdoing, while the Unification Church says the gifts were given without expectation of influence. Yoon faces multiple trials, including insurrection charges, following his failed attempt to impose martial law in 2024. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Mali's government will take a 51% majority stake in a new civil explosive company created with Chinese partner Oxen to reduce import dependence and tighten control over sensitive materials. The move comes as Bamako toughens regulation amid security concerns as they eye broader mining reforms. According to SDF fighters and media reports, Russia has begun withdrawing troops and equipment from positions in northeastern Syria, including a base near Kamishli airport. However, no official confirmation has been issued by the government for now. The move comes as government forces expand control over former SDF areas. Taiwan's defense ministry has warned that an opposition proposal to cut the planned $40 billion special military budget and drop the T-Dome air defense system, as they say it would not be practical for now and would undermine defense readiness amid growing pressure, as the special funding bill has now been blocked for the 10th time in Parliament. Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara will be visiting Moscow, Russia today to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This comes amid heightened regional tensions, as both are set to discuss those as priority. According to Syrian media reports, President Trump held a lengthy phone call with Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara, and they reiterated the importance of diplomacy amid heightened tensions with Iran. Guinea's President Mamadi Doumbouya has reappointed former junta member Amadou Ouriba as Prime Minister. Newly elected Doumbouya has also announced a new government structure of 27 ministries and 2 secretaries general, with more appointments expected. The U.S. is launching multi-day air drills in the Middle East, deploying a carrier-led armada as tensions rise with Iran, while Washington signals both military readiness and openness to the talks. U.S. President Donald Trump says the U.S. and South Korea will work something out after he announced the hike in tariffs on imports from the Asian country to 25%. Now for this hour, we start with U.S. White House aide Stephen Miller has acknowledged a potential breach of protocol by Customs and Border Protection agents before the fatal shooting of Alex Purdy in Minneapolis. Meanwhile, Miller had stated that the White House had issued clear guidance to send extra personnel to support deportation agents, but now they are evaluating why these additional forces may not have been properly utilized. This follows Miller's earlier controversial remarks, labeling Purdy a would-be assassin, which were quickly contradicted by video evidence showing that Purdy had been disarmed before being shot by agents. In response to the growing public outcry, President Trump has expressed a desire to de-escalate the situation, including the replacement of Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino with a new leader to help reduce the tensions. Now we welcome Mr. Sol Sadka. He's a political commentator, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Sadka, for joining us. Good to see you. Now looking at this, in the beginning there were conflicting remarks about this shooting of Mr. Purdy between federal officials and eyewitnesses and state government. Now that this has come out from White House aide, what are we to make of this whole scenario?
Yes, well, the video of his killing did not look good for the ICE officers involved. It wasn't like the previous incident with the car that happened about a week ago. This looked much more unambiguous. Now, a clear sign that the officers had already disarmed the victim, and at the time that he was shot, he had no guns on him at all, and was restrained on the ground. And a number of angles confirm this. So while there has been attempts from the administration over the past few days to depict the situation as being justified, that has become increasingly untenable over the past few days as further evidence has come out. And that is a position held by increasingly more people, even on the right in America. So no doubt Mr. Miller's statements take that into account, trying to correct their opinions to the opinions of the obvious reality, without allowing this to become a trigger for what might become another BLM-style situation, as happened 5 years ago.
Right. Thank you for highlighting that. And how do you think, where is the public trust in federal law enforcement and the administration's credibility now?
Well, the people that support the current U.S. government, the Trump administration, represent about half the public, and the people that oppose them also represent about half the public. However, the support for what's happening with the deportation of illegal immigrants, particularly what are being painted, at least, as violent illegal immigrants, criminals, people with criminal history, that kind of thing, is much higher and probably verges on the 75 to 25% support versus oppose. However, this kind of thing could easily sway the public in the other direction, and that's what the Trump administration is going to be concerned about. They want to maintain their support. As these deportations continued, it was always going to become more difficult for them, because there was inevitably going to be incidents like this. Whenever you have the interaction between armed authorities and armed people on the ground, eventually, every 1,000th time, you end up with an incident like this. And as these incidents keep piling up, the support from the public is likely to ebb away. So they need to prepare for this kind of incident, and they need to have their messaging in line, and that's what they're trying to do clearly. Whether it will work for them is unknown. But at some point, the support from the public, if this keeps happening on a weekly basis, is going to ebb away.
Right. How do you think, how can Trump gain back the trust and some votes that he has lost because of these things as midterm approaches?
Well, the situation with the Trump administration as the midterms approach in 8 months is, in general, not good. The chances of them retaining the House of Representatives are very slim, and they might even lose the Senate. So it's absolutely overridingly important for them to keep the public on their side and to make themselves even more popular and to do things that the public like. At the same time, their opposition, of course, is going to pick up incidents like this and use that as weapons against them. That is, after all, their job as the opposition. And they have to make sure that this kind of thing does not keep happening. If it does keep happening, their PR issues are only going to get worse. And my advice to them, if I was advising the administration, would be to make it very clear that while there are some 10 to 20 million illegal immigrants currently living in the USA, about 8% of the population, they should focus entirely with these deportations, entirely only on people who've been convicted of serious crimes. There are at least hundreds of thousands of those alone, and that is certainly enough to keep ICE busy until the midterm elections.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Sadka, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we move on to Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared that Israel will maintain security control over the entire area from the Jordan's river to the sea, including the Gaza Strip. Speaking on governance and security in Gaza, Netanyahu has emphasized that a Palestinian state in Gaza will not happen and reaffirmed his efforts to prevent its establishment. He has also ruled out the presence of Turkish or Qatari forces on the ground in Gaza following concerns over their involvement in post-war governance. Netanyahu has stated that Israel is vetting officials for Gaza to ensure that no members of Hamas's military wing are included in the technocratic committee managing day-to-day affairs. He has also added that the priority remains dismantling Hamas and preventing the Palestinian Authority from controlling Gaza while ensuring the functioning of essential services and salaries as well. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Sol Sadka. He's joining us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Sadka, for staying with us. Now, what more can you tell us about this latest statements from Netanyahu?
Well, Netanyahu has been clear for many, many years that he does not see a place for any kind of armed non-Israeli presence in the area that goes between the Jordan River Valley and the Mediterranean Sea. And that is the area of the historical British mandate that was then planned to be divided up into two states for Arabs and Jews, that the Jews accepted and the Arabs did not. And time has now passed. The Arabs in the region have attacked the Jews on at least 7 occasions, trying to remove them entirely from the Middle East and return them to other parts of the world. And that failed. And those failures have consequences. And the consequences are that the Jews in the area, who have their state now called Israel, have enough power and enough control to say, we are going to be the people who have a monopoly on violence in this region. Because if we don't have a monopoly on violence in this very specific region, there will be inevitable and constant conflict. And if we do have it, then we can ensure that things are relatively stable and safe here. And while Netanyahu himself in 2009 even joined the team that said he wants to see an Arab state, a Palestinian state, he said that with very strict guidelines, and he was very clear that that would be a demilitarized state. The prospects in the next 25 years of any kind of demilitarized Arab state are very poor, but it could be that if there is a generation raised towards peace, instead of being raised on textbooks that are full of plans for violent genocide against their neighbors, then it could be that in 25, 50 years, it will be possible to have some kind of Arab autonomy within that land. However, Netanyahu sets a position which is absolutely within the Israeli mainstream, and I think there are very few people in Israel now, after what we've seen in the past couple of years, who would disagree with him, that there can be no compromise on the issue of the fact that nobody else is going to have a military force here, because the land is too small, and there is no space for that. If that happens, there will be endless conflict, endless bloody war.
And can you tell us so far, what do we know about this technocratic committee? Who is invited, who's not, or who's taking place, and who is Netanyahu comfortable with taking place?
Well, Netanyahu has been very clear that he doesn't want certain people on the board. There have been compromises in this regard, and it's entirely uncertain exactly how it's going to work out. In the end, the technocratic committee is not going to be able to function in a serious way until Hamas is wiped out from the yellow zone of Gaza that they still control and have now for 6 months. They still continue to act there. The Israelis, in theory, can go in, they control the perimeter, but all the people of Gaza live within that yellow line zone, and they are under the day-to-day control, mostly, of Hamas. And there is no technocratic committee which is going to be able to stand against Hamas, because the technocratic committee isn't going to have any guns. Hamas have the monopoly on violence. And there's no prospect of that changing in the near future, because there's no one, including Israel, motivated to go in there and remove Hamas of their arms. What happens is entirely unknowable. But the technocratic committee can sit there, they can have all their members, and they can have meetings, but in practice, until Hamas is disarmed, somehow, which is not going to happen soon, they don't have any real power. So it barely matters who is on their board. They are just another talking shop, like a UN committee or something.
With that, I would like to thank Mr. Sol Satka for joining us today from Tel Aviv and sharing that insight. Now we move on to India. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said that India and the European Union have finalized a long-pending landmark trade deal as the two sides seek to hedge against fickle ties with the United States. According to reports, after almost 20 years of intermittent talks, the agreement will allow India to open its large and closely protected market to free trade with the 27-nation EU, its largest trading partner. Modi has stated that people across the world are talking about the deal, referring to it as the mother of all the deals, as this agreement will bring several opportunities to 1.4 billion Indians and millions of people across European countries. The trade between India and the EU stood at $136.5 billion in the fiscal year through March 2025. Meanwhile, some Indians have reacted. Let's listen to them.
Like our Honorable PM, he has a good relationship with the former nations and all, with the connected nations, but still he might be doing the betterment for the people. Like he has been done many things. Like previously, if you compare the GDP or economy of the country, and right now it has been developed a lot.
I believe that relying solely on just one country, again a very personal opinion, relying solely on just one country, one entity might lead to things that might not be good for any individual, any organization, or any country for that matter of fact. So seeing how we are starting to rely more on other countries as well, I think it might lead to some positive effect.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Nirmal Abraham. He's a political and economic analyst, joins us live from Kochi. Thank you very much, Mr. Abraham, for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Now looking at this, how could this India-EU free trade agreement reshape India and EU's ties and also economies over the next decade?
Right. I think as far as India is concerned, this is a great escape mechanism, although it came as a coincidence because, as you might be aware, because of Donald Trump, we were facing tariffs and a little bit of difficulty in trade as well. From where I'm from, Kerala, we had issues relating to, marine products, to leather, footwear and all of that. So this is a bypassing mechanism, thankfully, for India. Second thing, it is not just the US. I mean, we also have reliance on China that can be bypassed with this. So I think it's a win-win situation for both India and the European Union, and it will reshape the geopolitical, or I think I should say strategic and economic pattern of which the world was thinking before. Because India, for example, were charged with 25% tariffs for the US to gain favorable trade terms. We were charged with an additional 25% tariffs for buying Russian oil. Now, Trump announced just a month back that he might be charging another 25% secondary sanctions for trading with Iran. So to escape all of that, to set off all the loss that we might have gotten from these elevated tariffs, this will definitely help us, and it will also help the European Union because they were also under the scanner. If you might remember a couple of weeks back, Trump spoke about Greenland, and he nearly imposed an additional 10% sanctions on 8 European countries as well. So it's a great riddance for both India and the European Union from Donald Trump and his tariffs.
Yes, and Mr. Abraham, so from your analysis, which industries in India and the EU are most likely to benefit, or face the greatest adjustment pressures from these tariff reductions?
Right, I think to start with, it is agriculture, because agriculture was one sector that Donald Trump targeted. So we were facing difficulties in agriculture, in marine products, as well as footwear and textiles. Textiles, for example, we were missing out big against the likes of Bangladesh and Vietnam. In terms of machinery and industrial products, we were missing out to China as well as Korea. In terms of rubber, we were missing out to Malaysia and Thailand. So I think these are the sectors, as far as India is concerned, these are the sectors that we will get a relief from. And as far as the European Union is concerned, I would start with automobiles, because as we know, I mean, when you think of automobiles, the first country that you think of is Germany, which happens to be in the European Union, a strong member of the European Union. And as well as, there are manufacturers from Italy and France that would love to open up a bigger market in India. It's a win-win for them as well. The automotive sector, pharmaceutical sector, it's going to be a big win for the European Union. As far as India is concerned, as I said, agriculture, machinery, marine products, all of this is going to be good for India as well.
Right. And like you rightfully mentioned in my first question, that it took a while for them to come to this conclusion. So how do you think the protectionist stance of both EU and India's stance towards outside markets have played into the delay, or the fact that it took them 16 EU India summit to get into this conclude these talks?
Right. I think to be fair, as you said, 16 summits, 19 years, and almost 10 years of complete non-conversations. And eventually we got it at a time, thankfully, when Trump was pressurizing us with his tariffs. Also, if you look at the trend that India have been following, it almost seems like India were expecting this, because the options we have as a country are limited, because we are a large country, the biggest market, which also means we are a big exporter. But where could we export to? The one country that we could trust was the United States. With Trump and his tariffs, we lost that. With his unpredictability, we lost that. As far as China is concerned, because of the geopolitical tensions that we share with China, we didn't want China as a big market either. Russia, because of the sanctions, we couldn't approach Russia for a trade deal. Pakistan, of course, because of the enmity, we can't even think of Pakistan as an option. So the only option to substitute a market like the United States, which has 34 crore people,